Ah, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this week's Tuesday Tea. My name is Adde Waggoner and I'm the Sexual Assault Prevention Educator here at Crisis Services of North Alabama. And for our Tuesday Tea, we're spilling the tea on topics that are often difficult to talk about. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Edwards of Rocket City Pride. Brandon, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
As Eddie said, I'm Brandon Edwards. I'm the director of Rocket City Pride here in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm also a outreach specialist at Thrive Alabama. So I'm just pretty much one big book of resources. So if you need anything, let us know. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And throughout the month, we'll be having various discussions concerning domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence. This year, I think it's important that we talk about intimate partner violence through the lens of intersectionality and with an understanding that different populations experience IPV in different ways. Therefore, today's topic is domestic violence in queer populations. I will note here that queer is not a bad word, and LGBTQ plus communities are reclaiming this term as a positive, empowering one. Additionally, some of the topics that we discuss may be triggering for some viewers. If you feel like you need to talk with someone, Crisis Services 24-hour helpline is available for you at 256-716-1000. We also have a text line that's available in the evenings from 4 to 11:30 p.m. And the number for that is 256-722-8219. And that being said, we'll get to it. The most recent data available suggests that intimate personal violence is just as common, if not more prevalent, in LGBTQ plus relationships. Do you feel like this accurately describes the rates of IPV in our area?
Honestly, I don't know the rates in our area per se, but that does kind of make me raise an eyebrow because I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But with that being said, of course, if it is taking place, and please, everyone reach out to somebody. I can, of course, just thinking in a logical way. Sometimes in the smaller areas like Huntsville or smaller cities, if you will, I've come to find out that a lot of domestic violence does take place compared to your bigger cities because it's more so quiet kept, if that makes sense. But yeah, when it comes to that whole area, I would love to be more informed on it, just so that way I could possibly be a better resource, and of course, if not an ally, when it comes to that.
Okay. And I can say from the experience that we've had here at Crisis Services, because of the that we oversee the domestic violence shelters, we have seen a staggering increase in domestic violence calls and shelter seekers, and specifically more violent forms of domestic violence. And more often than not, it affects our females are typically victims. But during this pandemic, we've seen an almost equal number of males and females. So I say that to highlight that a lot of people still don't come forward. And if you feel that you might be encountered with discrimination or prejudice, then you're far more likely to come forward. Do you think it differs, the rates of IPV, do you think it differs among trans, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or other folks?
Yes, absolutely. When it comes to for the trans community, I know that they have it a little bit more difficult than anyone else. As a cis man of, cis man who is gay, I think I said that right. It's just a situation of looking at looking at the trans brothers and sisters in the community. It's difficult to see that you know, them standing in their truth, and of course being penalized for standing in their truth. And then of course when it comes to same gender loving relationships, you know, we're typically looked at as, okay, it's two men, they're fighting, what's the big deal about it? But of course, when we're in that partnership situation, it's a little more deeper than just two men having an altercation. And, you know, that, you know, it's wrong regardless if you're putting your hands on anybody. But when it comes to your partner, gay or straight, it's just a situation of, you know, that's not what's supposed to take place. Like, I think at this day and age, you know, we should be able to use our words compared to use our hands.
And I like the point that you said about if the police happen upon a domestic violence call between two males, it's just looked at as an altercation between two men. That's something that we see a lot, is that we'll get calls or the police will get called out to a domestic violence situation, and they end up arresting both the victim and the abuser because it looks like they got into a fight, when in actuality, the victim has probably taken so much abuse up to that point that they lash out, which is completely normal and understandable. So that happens in heteronormative relationships. So I can imagine that there may be some stigma associated with two males in a relationship, in a domestic violence relationship, especially when in the context of police coming. Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think, like, even with that, it's just you know, you always go into your own safety. Like, is the police officer that is coming, is he going to be homophobic? Is it going to be a situation where you're going to make a funny situation out of, you know, I'll just use myself as an example, or you're going to make a funny situation out of my pain or my misery or even my trauma, when, you know, you're here to protect the community. And so it's a lot of different aspects that come into mind. Of course, luckily, I'm glad to say that I haven't been in that type of situation, but it's just, you know, we don't know what can take place, but it's just a, you know, if I were to have gone down that road at some point, it's a situation where it's like, okay, do I just try to fend for myself and know that I'm getting my own justice, or do I, you know, do I actually call law enforcement to try to see if justice can be served by me being a victim in the situation?
Mm. Yeah, thank you for talking about that. That's important. And it kind of leads me to my next question, in that stigma can impact whether somebody feels comfortable or confident in reaching out for help. A statistic that I read estimates that upwards of 45% of victims do not report to police in the queer community. And another statistic I read stated that in 2012, less than 5% sought protection orders. So it seems like the unfair stigma creates barriers to someone seeking help, especially if you're a sexual minority, such as, and you can expand on these, I would love that, such as the fear of being outed. Perhaps their family doesn't know that they're in those relationships and such. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, because, like, again, with like you were saying, with somebody not being out to their family, like nowadays, I don't know if you ever noticed, like in the local gas stations, you see I forgot the name of the little magazine that has everybody's headshot who went to jail over the weekend. So sometimes, you know, you have people purchase those to make fun. And of course, it's like, okay, you know, you see that you're, you know, somebody you know's headshot in there. So of course somebody can be outed. Then again, like, being made fun of when it comes to the actual law enforcement. You know, I'm here hurting, you see I'm beaten up, and you're laughing because I'm in a domestic situation with my partner. So had it not been a relationship, would I be like what would be the situation then? Because like you said before, both of us are going to jail for fighting, but always I look at it as, okay, somebody's trying to defend themselves. So both parties may not always be guilty. Um, excuse me. And then of course I look at the bisexual community. They have, I believe, higher rates than anybody, both male and female. Of course, females are higher. I do believe just because of the simple fact that men like to test their manhood when it comes to bisexual women who identify as bisexual, which I don't, at the end of the day is not right, because you're forcing yourself on somebody who did not ask you to come in their personal space, whether it be sexual or physical. I also just look at it as, let people let people be. No one just necessarily is asking for any type of domestic violence situation to take place. If they are, I'm not going to yuck your yum, but it's not for me. So, I just think that people just need to let people be.
I agree. I agree. And I appreciate what you said about, again, viewing it as just an altercation. But we have to remember in all domestic violence situations, whether it be a same-sex couple or a trans person, or just, a hetero couple, it's always a power dynamic at play. There's someone who has more control and power over the other person. Whether, the police come across and they've both been violent with each other, there's still a power dynamic. So I appreciate you kind of hinting to that, because it's an important distinction that we have to make, because they're not just beating up on each other. There is that power dynamic at play. And I thought also about legal issues that some may encounter. Of course, same-sex marriage is legal per the Supreme Court, but that may not always translate to legal protections or fair viewing, perhaps, in the court systems. So I thought that, and correct me, that may be a barrier to someone coming forward and seeking legal protections from their abuser, because they feel like they may be looked at differently in the court system.
Yeah, I can honestly see that being seeing that being a stipulation, just because you know and I guess just going off of Huntsville, Alabama, at that, we just live in an area where it's just you know frowned upon, I guess is the best way to look at it. It's not really fully accepted. I guess it's more so tolerated. There we go. Um, so I just think that if that situation were to take place, it would just be, like throw your hand away with it, just because of the simple fact that it's not a heteronormative relationship. You know, sometimes you never know what the person has stated before law enforcement gets involved, because I'm a bigger guy, and if I were to go into a situation where I'm trying to get away from my partner, it's like, okay, you're a big dude, why can't you take care of yourself? That's not what the situation is. I'm trying to stay safe, so that way nobody else is hurt. Like, that's the main thing, trying to stay safe. So if I want to go into, get a protection order against my partner, even if he is 5'2" and skinny as a toothpick, he may have a knife or a gun or something. Nobody necessarily knows that part. So let me be safe. Let me get my piece of paper that says stay away from me. And if he doesn't, he goes to jail all on his own.
Yep. And I want to point out too, in Madison County, in the areas that Crisis Services covers, we actually have advocates. We have domestic violence responder advocates that go out with police officers overnight on calls. And so that if they encounter a a suspected domestic violence call, they're trained to recognize those subtle signs that something may be off and try to provide information and services to the victim. And something else that we do that can help mitigate that, the legality issues, is that we also have advocates that go into the court system. So if somebody needs to get a PFA against their abuser, then we have advocates that go with them to help them navigate that. It's been an invaluable program in Madison County specifically, given the larger population here in this county. But I think that helps, and all the advocates and volunteers that we have doing both of those positions are trained, number one, in trauma-informed care practices, as well as cultural sensitivity and competence.
Yeah, I think that's great as well, because I guess like even on our end at Thrive, we just started a new grant, the vocal grant, that does something pretty much similar. Once we got the grant, I was leaving that department, so I don't know the technical the logistics of it and everything. So, but I can say they're doing well.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. The more resources that we have, the better.
Right.
So the next interesting point that I read recently is that LGBTQ plus victims that identified as Black or African American were more likely to experience interpersonal violence than those who identified as white. This kind of hints that a person's intersectional identities have an impact on their protective and risk factors for IPV. And what I mean by intersectional identities, of course, is like male, female, or other, such as trans, or your ethnicity, or any of those things that kind of intersect to make us who we are. Do you feel like it's important that these intersections are integrated in how we as a society approach tackling the problem of interpersonal violence?
I do. I just think of it as like when it comes to the Black community, like you can't necessarily always handle every situation the same. There are, and I guess the best way to look at it is the BLM movement. Like there's been different situations that have taken place where, everybody can go back and say shoulda, coulda, woulda, or what should have been done, or what have you. But I just think that regardless of wherever the cards lay, like you can't just, I guess I hate to say it again, but just handle each situation the same. Because, like, for example, with myself, I grew up in the suburbs of Birmingham, Alabama, and somebody who, of course, is from the inner city. We're not the same, same complexion possibly, but their mindset is going to be different from mine just because of how possibly they were raised. I know sometimes that the Black community, it can sometimes be perceived as we're always angry or always have a chip on our shoulder or wanting to always jump to fight. And that's not always true. It also goes back to possibly childhood. You don't necessarily know if this person had a lot of trauma in their childhood compared to somebody who has not. So I think we just need to take a step back and not just jump the gun and start, I guess, hitting people. Honestly, just it's okay to have a conversation and figure out what's the root of the problem, because you see people fighting over the fact that somebody stepped on somebody's shoe, or you looked at my boyfriend 10 seconds too long, or what have you. It's okay. It's a lot more than shoes and spouses and eyes and glances that are taking place in the world in order to say something.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Um, I like how you explained that. And I want to follow up by saying, I asked that question not to be divisive and say like, oh, this problem's bigger in this community or something like that. It's more of tackling these questions and these issues head on and understanding that, like you said, it's not a one size shoe fits all kind of thing. We have to look at the individuality of the circumstances and what the intersections of that person's life have entailed to bring them where they are.
Right.
You mentioned trauma as well, and I think that's also an important piece to the puzzle, because a lot of people who have been victimized previously, whether it's through child sexual abuse or witnessing domestic violence or even being a bully or being targeted by someone who's bullying, can impact our likelihood of getting into a violent relationship. And so, like you said, it doesn't just, it's not all the same for every person, and somebody's experiences throughout their life can impact what their experiences are in their relationships, of course. So taking a more individualized approach seems like the healthy approach.
Right. Because, like, I guess, even still, like the world we live in now, we typically want it to be black and white, just that's it, on off. But, like, with times changing, the way that people are running the country, some bad, some good. But at the end of it, I just think that we're at a point where we have to just be in a gray area where it's okay to disagree. It's okay to not be your typical heterosexual normative, or just, yeah, it's okay to just be who you are and stand in your truth, whether you're black, white, gay, straight, the whole shebang. So, it's just, yeah, you have to look at every situation differently. Because I think, like, one thing that I'm really happy about that we've done at Thrive is we've partnered with the police department, and um, I cannot actually think of the correct term, but it's pretty much we're partnering with the police department so we can help them understand mental health issues compared to them automatically arresting somebody and putting them in jail when it's, they're just reacting on how they know how to react because of, possible trauma, possible drug abuse, or what have you. So it's just different situations. Of course, you can't just always pull your gun and whether it be shoot or traumatize somebody even more because they have a gun to their face. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm proud of the things that Thrive has been able to do. And same on our end at Crisis Services, we, trying to provide good training for officers and more recently firefighters, so that they know what to look for when they go on calls, and crisis intervention teams and things like that. So I talked a little bit about some of the services that we have here at Crisis Services, but a lot of people still don't know more about Rocket City Pride. I know it's more than a parade and a flag, so I'd love to hear more about what you all are doing and how we can contact you.
So with Rocket City Pride, I like to think of us as a big resource for any and everybody. Um, Outside of our typical parade and our festival that we hold, we were trying to do monthly events so that way we can stay visible to the community, whether those events be fun or educational, because I do feel that everybody needs to be educated in any type of way, because I'm still trying to figure out the alphabet soup of the LGBTQIA plus community, because that can be a doozy there. Then also it's just at this point, of course, with COVID taking over the world, we were not able to do a lot of our events, but we're still pushing through. We're doing a lot of things in the background to where we just updated our logo to where it's now representation of the progress flag that has the black, brown, pink, and blue stripe for the Blacks, Latinx, and transgender communities. So it's just all inclusive, and that's one thing that we pride ourselves on this year. How you can reach us, of course, at our website, rocketcitypride.org. Have our Facebook page. If you send us a message, and we'll try our best to get back to you as soon as possible. We are all volunteer based, so we do have our jobs, and then we got to make sure job is taken care of before we can do the volunteer stuff. Not to discredit anything or anybody, but bills come first. But we are also on Instagram and Twitter, Rocket City Pride AL. And yeah, we're just around. Just give us a shout.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for talking with me today, and we will look forward to another edition of Tuesday Tea next week.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.